What's up, guys? It's Toad. I'm back. Feeling like ass this morning. Sick days, sick Wednesdays. Getting you a little bit of a later show here today. 1-1 yesterday. My Boston Bruins did not look good. The final score was closer than the game probably even was, but that was an underdog price. So the 1-1 was still a winning day because I won on the over in the Mets-Philadelphia game, which that game was pretty low scoring throughout much of it, and I don't know, maybe I got a little bit lucky on that one, but the Philadelphia bullpen not being very good was part of that handicap, and that's what came into play there as the Mets scored a bunch of late runs. I'm going to have two plays today. I don't feel good about this at all, really. We have all four baseball series in play. We got hockey, and we got college football. Man, it's that time of year, man, we just get everything at once, and it's hard to focus. Oh, I'm already looking at hockey here. I was going to talk about baseball first. So we got a situation here where every series was tied 1-1. That was the case going into yesterday, at least. But now San Diego and who was the other team that won yesterday? The Mets. Yeah, they're both up 2-1 now. But I think I mentioned it on yesterday's show. This is the first time in history that all four divisional series were tied 1-1, which just seemed kind of weird to me. I don't really see how that could possibly be the case with so many years of baseball, but I guess that is the case. And maybe it's after like the playoff. I guess it's maybe because the playoff structure has changed recently, so we haven't had that many years with this structure. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. All right, first up, Cleveland, Detroit. I think some of these analyses are going to be pretty quick. This is a game where it's like, I don't even know what's going on in this game, man. Cleveland and Detroit, you have basically question mark versus question mark on the hill here. Is Cleveland, they're pitching Alex Cobb in this game. Don't ask me why he's in their playoff rotation. I mean, I guess it's the experience factor. He is an experienced pitcher. I mean, I shouldn't make fun of my homeboy out of Boston, Mass, right? He has a 2.76 ERA, 1.04 whip on the season. So, I mean, yeah, his stats are good on the season, but I would take that with a grain of salt because he only made 3 starts this entire season. He was injured all season, basically, and then he came back in August, made a shortened start, and then they kind of ramped up his they didn't even ramp him up, really. It looked like they were keeping him to about 80 pitches each time. He just pitched more efficiently in his most recent outing against Pittsburgh, but he only had 1 start this season against an American League team at Minnesota, and it wasn't a good one. As you can see here, 4 2/3 innings, 4 earned runs allowed, 1 strikeout, 9 hits, 1 walk. Pretty disastrous start, but granted, that was his first start in a long time, so you could take that either way, really. I usually throw a guy's first start of the season out completely as far as like trying to handicap them. He's just really difficult to handicap because you don't know what you're going to get out of him. I think the more reasonable approach for him would really be to just look at his most recent seasons, the last couple of seasons, even though he was on different teams. With San Francisco, mediocre stats. His ERA was in the 3s, a whip around 1.3, but that's also what you're getting out of his career numbers as well. So probably that's about an accurate way to look at Cobb, the fact that he's a mediocre pitcher. And then up against Detroit's hitters, we don't have much of a sample size. Only 1 for 4. Only Ibanez has a hit off of him. So not much to take away from that either, other than the fact that it does mean Detroit's hitters are not familiar with Cobb. Cobb is the more experienced pitcher out of who. Well, we don't even know who's pitching on the other side, but that's what you got going with Detroit, or with Cleveland, excuse me, in that one. Detroit undecided. I mean, Skubal pitched in game 2, so you know Detroit's throwing a bullpen game at you because when it's not Skubal, it's going to be the Detroit bullpen. And the one thing Detroit does have going for them here is that, well, I mean, the bullpen scenario, as I said, the bullpen game always kind of throws off the opposing hitters, or that's the idea at least, because they can't get used to one pitcher for an extended period of time. But Detroit also, both of these teams had yesterday off, so that will help both bullpens, but it certainly helps line up Detroit's bullpen in this game for a bullpen game, you know, because they got to rest all their relief pitchers yesterday. So that means their bullpen will probably be fully available for a game where they're going to be doing a bullpen game. So that's a little bit of an edge to Detroit there as well. I think I would give Detroit an edge as far as like some aspects of that, just because of the nature of the bullpen game and how it throws off the opposing hitters. But Cleveland has the better bullpen in general. despite what we saw earlier in the series when they had, what was it, Clace, I think, came out of the bullpen and allowed a bunch of runs late in the game, which was like the first time I think he had done that all season. And Cleveland does have the better offense as well. Cleveland is still the better team here, but they're sitting at minus 108. There's been no movement really, and the total's sitting at 7. We've seen no percentages on this at all. It's such a mystery of a game. I don't want to touch this game at all. The next game up after that is going to be the first NLDS game of the day, Philadelphia and New York. Both of these teams played yesterday, of course. Philadelphia's bullpen did not do well again yesterday. I won on my over yesterday in that one. This was a game, I mean, it's hard to gauge what's going to happen coming into this game, but the Mets saved a lot of their bullpen. They actually got a much better start out of Manaea than I expected. He's pitched well in the postseason so far. Nola struggled a bit, which I kind of expected that. That was part of my handicap, but now we're in a situation where the Phillies used multiple extra relievers over what the Mets use, although, of course, in the playoffs, you have a shorter starting rotation, so you do have more relief pitchers, so I don't know if that matters as much, but the Mets will have a little bit of the bullpen rest edge here on top of having the better bullpen anyway. So a little bit of an edge to the Mets there. As far as the bullpen is concerned, Philadelphia always gets the hitting edge because they have the better offense. Ranger Suarez is pitching for the Phillies. I don't really trust Suarez, and it seems like Philly doesn't either. He had a really good start to the season, but then kind of regressed a bit and became what we expected him to be towards the back end of the season. I mean, he's a decent pitcher, but Philly has him as basically the last man up in their starting rotation. So their starting rotation in the playoffs is actually pretty good if he's the last guy out for the starting rotation. 3.46 ERA, 1.2 whip. Not bad overall, but like I said, he struggled down the stretch, and in September he was really bad with a 6.04 ERA, 17-12 strikeout walk ratio. He did not pitch well in September, and he faced the Mets in his second-to-last outing, although he gave up 2 runs in 5 innings. It wasn't that bad of a start, but that means the Mets saw him not that long ago. And this is also going to mean he hasn't pitched in the playoffs yet, so he's had some extra time off, so that means he's pitching off schedule, basically. So I think the Mets are going to have a little bit of an extra edge as far as that aspect of it as well. The fact that the Mets are going to have a guy pitching on schedule, whereas Philadelphia has a guy who hasn't pitched for a while. He's off schedule. The Mets did just see him, and Suarez has not pitched in the playoffs yet this year. So the Mets do actually have an edge in the starting pitching matchup, in my opinion, as well, except do I want to play on Jose Quintana? Usually I do not. And Suarez does have good numbers against the Mets in his career. 143 at-bat sample size. That's a big sample size. 29-16 strikeout walk ratio. So he does walk too many of these guys, or maybe his strikeout rate is a little bit too low. I don't know. The walk number seems a little bit too high to me. That ratio is not good, but he's held him to a 238 average and 692 OPS. So Suarez does pitch pretty well against the Mets. So even though I think the Mets may have some edges as far as how their pitching scheduling lines up, I don't think that they really have the better starting pitcher in this matchup. So some conflicting indicators going on in this game. If they did, I think the Mets would be the way to go in this game, and potentially I still lean that way because they also do have a bit of the momentum edge as they won yesterday. Jose Quintana's pitching. He made one start in the playoffs already, so he has one game under his belt. He pitched against Philly not that long ago in September as well, but it was a 7-inning shutout, only allowing 3 hits and no walks, so he pitched well. He is in really good form right now, so I think that does favor the Mets as well. The fact that even though Quintana may not be that good, he's pitching well down the stretch, man. 0.72 ERA in September. He's got that one playoff game under his belt. Now, he pitched well in that game, too, with a 6-inning shutout of the Mets. Only walked 1 in that game, so he's been pitching well. And against Philly, he does have good numbers in his career, an 191 at-bat sample size, 44-7 strikeout walk ratio, and has held him to a 241 average and 645 OPS. So Quintana, even though he's a guy I make fun of all the time, like if you're going to go with if you're going to go with Quintana, go with the Mets behind Quintana in any spot, I mean, this spot doesn't look like a horrible one to do it. The favorite is flipped from the Mets plus 105 to minus 108, so the Mets have become the favorite. But I do see 53% of tickets on the Mets, so a little bit public, but 74% of the cash on the other side on Philadelphia. So the market percentage looks like it's indicating strongly on Philadelphia, but the line movement has actually come in on the Mets side. So it's hard to read that Yeah, it's hard for me to read the market in that one. So this is a little bit of a tough game for me to read. I have a slight lean to the Mets based on what I just said. The total, I don't know what to say about the total. It's sitting at 7.5, juice to the under. It's come in a little bit. The total has gone a little bit down on the under there. 73% of the tickets and only 53% of the cash on the over. So based on just the market read alone, the lean would be slightly towards the under, but I don't trust Philly's bullpen. Philly's offense is pretty good. So based on the starting pitching matchup, yeah, the under might make sense because both pitchers have pretty decent numbers against the opposing hitters, but I'm not going to come in on that one. The game I'm actually going to come in on is the next one. It's going to be a first 5-inning play on the Kansas City Royals at -105, so money line in the first 5. I'm going with the starting pitching matchup in this one, man. And the market has conflicting indicators in this one, too, with the Yankees down from -110 to -109. Both of these teams did not play yesterday. All the NL teams played yesterday. The AL teams did not. So bullpen-wise, both bullpens are going to be available in this game. The Yankees have the better bullpen, or at least they did over the course of the season. Their bullpen's been good so far in the playoffs, but it's a very small sample size. Kansas City, their bullpen wasn't that good during the regular season, but their bullpen's been doing better during the playoffs so far. So kind of some conflicting factors there with Kansas City's bullpen. I give the bullpen edge to the Yankees still, though. And the offensive edge, of course, goes to the Yankees. But Kansas City is a much better home team, and this specific starting pitching matchup is what I'm focused in on here. Yankees down from -110 to -109. They're public with 62% of the tickets, but 86% of the cash. So it looks like they have the cash discrepancy, but it looks like the line has moved down a little bit on the New York Yankees. So some conflicting indicators there, too. Kansas City should have a little bit of the momentum because they were able to steal game 2, and they did kind of steal it in a way in game 2, but they won the game against the Yankees in game 2. And Kansas City has the biggest home road dichotomy in baseball, basically. Man, they were much, much better at home than they were on the road. So taking Kansas City at home does make more sense. And then looking at the starting pitching matchup, this is what I'm kind of focused in on. Clark Schmidt is pitching for the Yankees. Good numbers this season, 2.85 ERA, 1.18 whip. However, he didn't have that many starts this season, man. He was pitching early in the season, and then he got injured at the end of May, and then he didn't come back until September. He did fine in September with a 3.65 ERA and a 26-10 strikeout walk ratio. Maybe not as good. So I think in September what we're seeing is he may have been kind of regressing a little bit after he had a really hot start to the season. But overall, I mean, he's not that young a guy, and his career stats overall aren't as good. So this year, when he was pitching better, is a smaller sample size. So I think the reality lies somewhere in the middle there. Career, he has an ERA of around 4 and a 1.3 ERA. So I think that's probably closer to what you should expect out of Schmidt, although it is possible that in his second full season as a starter, he has found something and gotten a little bit better as a 28-year-old. That is possible, but I think it's something you don't usually see that much with a guy, but maybe he just had a delayed start to his career. I don't know, because of the COVID, stupid lockdown years and whatever else, and he wasn't a starter until at some points in 2022. Well, I guess he was a starter a little bit in the other two, but he didn't pitch very much at all in the prior 2 years prior to that. So hard to say, has he actually found something at this point? Again, I think it's somewhere in the middle, and I think he's probably not as good as what we saw early this season. I think he's probably an okay pitcher. He is pitching off schedule, so as far as what I said about Ranger Suarez, Schmidt has not pitched yet in the playoffs this year, so that I think is a little bit of an extra edge to the Kansas City side of the starting pitching matchup here, where Schmidt has had a little bit of an extended time off, so he's not on schedule anymore here, and he's making his first postseason start of the season, and his last start against Pittsburgh wasn't very good, against kind of a weak lineup, but maybe he just didn't care about the game, but he allowed 4 runs in 4 innings, walked 4 guys as well. He did strike out 5, but that doesn't look that great. So his most recent start wasn't that good. And then against Kansas City, we have a 51 at-bat sample size. He does have an 11-2 strikeout walk ratio against them, but he's allowed 4 home runs spread across a bunch of their hitters, and they have a 314 average of 1,006 OPS against him. So he has struggled against Kansas City's lineup. And I know I went to Yahoo, and I looked at a bunch of his stats on Yahoo. He's made 1 start at Kauffman Stadium, and I believe it wasn't that good. Let me see here. No, not Survival Football. No. Oh, wait, it did go to Clark Schmidt. Never mind. Let me see. Yeah, so Clark Schmidt, yeah, so it's hard to navigate, but he has made 3 postseason appearances, and this is going to be his first postseason start ever. He's made 3 relief appearances for the Yankees, and he has 11.57 ERA across 2 1/3 innings, so that doesn't bode that well for him. Maybe there'll be a little bit of nerves here because this is going to be his first postseason start, so the experience definitely goes to Seth Lugo as well. One thing that goes towards Schmidt, though, is that he was better on the road than at home this year, but I think some of it has to do with the fact that the Yankees park is just a more hitter-friendly park, I would have to say. And Seth Lugo is actually a little bit worse at home, so that's not great either. But his stats were pretty decent either way, so I don't think there's that much you can take away from that. And Clark Schmidt does have one start ever at Kauffman Stadium, and it was mediocre. I think he had like a 5-inning performance, allowing 2 runs or something like that. So not much you can take away from that either. On the other side, we got Seth Lugo going. He did have one start where they shortened his start a little bit against Baltimore, and he had a 6-1 strikeout walk ratio, only allowed 1 earned run, did allow 5 hits in 4 1/3. So not the best start, but not a horrible start either. And I think that allowed him to get back into his pitching schedule at the very least. So he's going to be on schedule, and that means he got his first postseason start of the year out of the way. So that's good. 3 ERA, 1.09 whip on the season. He was pitching well down the stretch in September, 26-4 strikeout walk ratio, 2.28 ERA. So he was the guy in better form, a bit better form coming down the stretch. He's the guy that has the one playoff start out of the way, and against the Yankees in 96 at-bats. He's actually done well. 32-11 strikeout walk ratio isn't that great. It's too many walks, but he's held them to a 229 batting average and 631 OPS. So Seth Lugo has the much better starting pitching numbers against the opposing hitters over Clark Schmidt. And then if we can look up Seth Lugo here, he has more playoff experience. He has more experience in general, really. Looking at his postseason, though, it's he does only have 1 start ever in the postseason, and that was the one this year. So he actually didn't have that much playoff experience. He had 3 relief appearances prior to that, I guess, for a combined 2 innings, but he didn't allow any runs across that span. So neither of these pitchers have a ton of playoff experience, but Lugo, it's actually weird that he didn't have that much playoff experience because he's been around for so long, but he finally got that playoff start out of the way under his belt. So I think that you could still say that he's the more experienced pitcher, and his start schedule-wise just sets up a bit better for him coming into this game. So I like that aspect of it as well. So I favor Lugo in this game, obviously. So that's where I'm going in that one. Kansas City, minus 105 money line. And by the way, the first 5-inning money line, if it winds up being a tied game through the first 5 innings, the money line will actually push. So that's not bad either. And then on the total in this one, it's gone down from 8.5 juice to the under to 8 juice to the over. A slight move down where it was 65% of the tickets and 53% of the cash on the over. So market indicators are on the under in this one too, but I don't know what to think about that. I never like to play unders really when one of the starting pitchers doesn't have good stats against the opposing hitters, and it's a pretty good Yankees lineup and a maybe not totally trustworthy Kansas City bullpen, which again is why I made that a first 5-inning bet. Dodgers, San Diego is the late game. San Diego maybe has a little bit of momentum here because they took yesterday's game just like the Mets did. So San Diego's up 2-1 here. Dylan Cease is the listed starter, and it was undecided. And since Cease has been listed as the starter, that's why this line, moved way up. I think it was at 110. The books threw out a 110 when we didn't know who the starter was going to be. Now that it's Cease, it's moved up to minus 142. Total has gone down from 8.5 juice to the under to 8 juice to the under, which I think both of those moves are just because it was announced that Cease is going to be starting, I think. So I don't think that there's legitimate market movement coming in on those, really. I think the books just had to adjust for Cease being in there. We don't know who the Dodgers starter is going to be, so this is a tough handicap here. I don't think we know really what to do with this game at this point. Dylan Cease, 3.47 ERA, 1.07 whip on the season. He was good throughout the season. He started struggling a bit in August, but then bounced back in September. 27-10 strikeout walk ratio was a bit too many walks, but he had 19 hits allowed in 30 and a third innings, so he did not allow many hits down the stretch. 2.97 ERA in September, but he faced the Dodgers last in September. Then he faced them again, obviously, for his first playoff start in this series, and he didn't do well in that series either. Gave up 5 earned runs in 3 1/3, 5-2 strikeout walk ratio, allowed 6 hits, so not a good performance from Cease, and he was up against Yamamoto, so my guess would be that Yamamoto's probably going again for the Dodgers in this one, but I'm not 100% sure because obviously the Dodgers have not announced that yet. Yamamoto didn't do that well in that start either in that game. Both starting pitchers didn't do that well. I thought Cease was lined up to be the better pitcher there because he does have some playoff experience. He's been the better, he's been a pretty good pitcher overall, I should say. He's been one of the better pitchers in San Diego's lineup, so I think there are some reasons to like the San Diego side in this one and like Cease in this one, but we don't know, again, who LA's starting pitcher is going to be. I think LA has the slight offensive advantage, slightly better hitters. San Diego's offense is certainly nothing to scoff at, though, and San Diego has the better of the two bullpens. So that's the way that you can kind of read these games in this series. And I believe because San Diego won yesterday, I believe that they actually used more of their relievers yesterday as well because they had to hold off the Dodgers in this game. So San Diego did use some of their better relief pitchers in that game yesterday. So the San Diego has the better bullpen overall, but the bullpen rest scenario is not as good for San Diego coming into this one. Dylan Cease against the Dodgers, factoring in the last start, has kind of hurt his numbers against the Dodgers. We're now looking at 100 at-bat sample size, 35-12 strikeout walk ratio, and we're up to a 270 batting average against an 808 OPS. So I think his numbers were, I would say, I'd probably classify them as decent going into that first start against the Dodgers, and now we're looking at numbers that are a little bit worse just because he had that one bad start against the Dodgers. He's had 2 not very good starts in a row against the Dodgers. So Cease, maybe there are a few things to not love about Cease coming into this one, even though I do like him overall as a pitcher. So hard to gauge that game. We'll have to see what happens there. The line has actually fallen now down to 132, I guess, on San Diego on that one. So those are hard to gauge. My one play is on the first 5 innings in a starting pitching matchup that I think you can gauge a little bit better in that Yankees-Kansas City game on the Kansas City Royals. We'll move to NHL where I have my other play. We got 5 games today. I'm not going to belabor this. This is the first game for all these teams, first regular season game for all these teams. So there's not much that you can really glean from what's going on in these games, except my one play is going to be trying to do what I did yesterday. It didn't work out yesterday, but this is a little bit of a different scenario. I'm going to take the Winnipeg Jets money line plus 142 here. We're playing a lot of, this is hockey, man. You play a lot of money line underdogs, and the way that I do this is I pay less. So when I bet the money line underdog, I am betting to win the same amount that I'm betting a regular bet to win. So usually you lay minus 110. So you pay like $110 to win 100 essentially, right? On like a normal bet. So I'm saying that when you play the underdog, you're still playing it to win $100. So that means you have to pay less to try to win that $100, right? Like you're paying $60, $70, whatever, to win the 100 instead. So that's the way I do this. So you don't need to win even 50% of these to profit long term. You just need to win like 40-something percent. I think the spot sets up decently for Winnipeg in this game, man. I mean, Edmonton's going to be public. Everybody loves Connor McDavid. They love this Edmonton offense. 59% of the tickets, although it looks like 89% of the cash on Edmonton right now. I'm not sure that I necessarily buy that, and the line has dropped from minus 170 to minus 162 on Edmonton. So some conflicting factors there where the line has dropped a little bit towards Winnipeg, but it looks like we do have the cash percentage on Edmonton right now. I'm fading the public either way, though. It looks like if the line moved against Edmonton, it did move against the public, so that is a reverse line movement against Edmonton there. Edmonton, like I said, they're the team the public's going to come in on because of the way that they can score. They really can definitely score. They have a lot of those guys from last year's team back. And they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals last year. But that's the reason why I'm fading them here, man, because that wasn't even that long ago, man. Edmonton has not had that much of a break, and they lost the Stanley Cup Finals. So the Stanley Cup hangover, I talked about it with Florida last night. It didn't work out that well, but the hangover tends to be more exacerbated on the team that lost the finals. And I talk about this with the Super Bowl, too. It happens in almost every sport. Like with the Super Bowl, it didn't work out for me going against the 49ers this year either, but it is a thing where the team that loses the finals. And I think maybe it's even more exacerbated in like hockey and maybe NBA because that team had to play for like an extra like month or month and a half with these extended playoffs. They go months through the playoffs, go all the way to the end. And then it went 7 games in this case, only for Edmonton to lose right at the end. And the way they did that, I think Edmonton was down 3-0 in that series. And then they tried to become the only NHL team in history to come back from a 3-0 playoff series deficit. And I think they sent it to 7 games. Man, I'm pretty sure that was the case, right? You can correct me if I'm wrong. So that was the most like intense, like brutal way to lose a Stanley Cup Finals you could possibly have for Edmonton. And that's what they're coming off of. So I think Edmonton's in a bad Stanley Cup hangover spot here, man. After all that, they had to exert way more energy. Winnipeg made the playoffs, but they had an early exit in the playoffs last year. They've been good over the recent years. They've been a playoff team. I think 6 out of the last 7 years they made the playoffs. And yeah, they had an early exit against a pretty good Colorado Avalanche team in the playoffs last year. So Winnipeg, I think they're going to be the extra motivated team here too, whereas Edmonton might be in a bit of that hangover spot. Edmonton won their last 2 games of the regular season against Winnipeg last year at Winnipeg. And yes, Edmonton did actually kind of dominate Winnipeg in all 3 matchups that they had last year. I looked, Edmonton had the massive shot edge in all those games, but it is also kind of the style of play of these two teams. Edmonton just fires a ton of shots at you, man, even though Skinner, their goalie, did actually play pretty well last year. Prior to last year, Edmonton's goaltender situation was really kind of a question mark. So I don't know if Skinner has maybe just kind of found his place there. He was definitely good last year. So I'm not going to say that Skinner is like an untrustworthy goalie or anything like that. But Winnipeg, I think, does have the defensive and the goaltending edge here. Winnipeg was more of a defensive team, a team that kind of slowed the pace in a lot of games last year. And it's almost like they built themselves to try to counter Edmonton's fast-paced, ridiculous offense by trying to play defense and slow it down. It didn't work out well, though. Winnipeg only played 1 time at Edmonton last year, which was early in the season. It was the only time these teams faced off at Edmonton, and Winnipeg actually won the game, I think 3-2, even though Edmonton had a shot edge in a major way in that game. So maybe it was a misleading final result, but Winnipeg did still win that game. Edmonton, over the recent years, actually has not totally dominated their division opponents at home, and Winnipeg has actually done fairly well at Edmonton over the last couple of years, so the recent history looks okay for Winnipeg here as well. Winnipeg, like I said, you're taking a pretty big underdog, just saying that they have a chance to stay in this game, and you're getting them as a pretty big underdog price, but as the team with the better defense. So basically playing the underdog with the better defense, is something I like to do. And I think they actually have the better goaltender, even though Skinner's defense was good last year. And I haven't looked at who the actual starting goaltenders are here. This is the other thing about the Bruins last night. Swayman, even though they had just locked him up for that big contract, they didn't even play him last night. I don't know why. Most of these teams, I think you're going to see them play their starting goalie, their number 1 goalie in these games. The Bruins did not, and they played, what's his name? Korpisalo, I think is his name. Joonas Korpisalo is the Bruins' second goalie. Now, for some reason, he started the game yesterday, and he was awful. Korpisalo. He looked like a corpse in net there, man, because Florida was just getting everything around him. He was terrible. I don't know what that was last night. Bruins, you lock up Swayman into this huge deal. No, just have him sit on the bench while he watches his backup do terribly in the game. I don't even know what that was. The Bruins offense did well last night. The Bruins actually showed heart, at least. Actually, they started out horribly. They were getting massively outshotted early in the game, but the Bruins actually turned it around, and that was one of their problems last year. They got totally outshotted in a lot of these games, including in the playoffs, but it looked like it was going to be another one of those awful games for them, but they turned it around, and they turned their offense on into like the second period of that game last night. So at least the Bruins did show some motivation in that game. So it wasn't all that bad for the Bruins last night. But anyway, back to Winnipeg, Edmonton here. I'm assuming that both teams are going to be playing their starters in this game. But, if they're not, I kind of still just like this just because of the Stanley Cup hangover aspect of this. But Winnipeg, people might forget. Their defense was really good last year, but they had one of the best goaltenders in the league. I think they had the best goaltender in the league, right? I think he won the Vezina, if I'm not mistaken. Hellebuyck is their goalie. I don't know how to pronounce it. Hellebuyck is how I pronounce it, because it almost sounds like puke. AJ Puke. No, Connor Hellebuyck is their Connor Hellebuyck. I can't even pronounce it now. the Hellebuck stops here. Hopefully he's going to be making a lot of stops here. Hellebuck was one of the best goalies in hockey last year, man. He was one of the ones who put up better stats than Skinner did on the season. So I trust him in net there. Hopefully it is going to be him. He's still there for Winnipeg, of course. And Winnipeg, one of the things they did over the offseason, I don't remember the names because I'm not that familiar with a lot of the individual hockey players' names, but Winnipeg did go out and they added some offensive players because that was kind of their weak point last year. They played really well defensively, but they kind of just couldn't score enough, and they played a lot of ugly games. That was kind of their style, ugly, physical, which matches up, I think, decently against Edmonton, even though Edmonton just really outshot them last year, so that does scare me a little bit. But Edmonton, yeah, I mean, they're basically all offense almost, but they can outscore basically anybody in the league. But Winnipeg added some components where they're going to try to be improving their offense and trying to be able to score enough to hang with Edmonton and try to balance out what they got going on there and still playing better defense. So that's what we're going to have with Winnipeg there. I'm playing Winnipeg plus 142. That's the hockey breakdown. I don't think there's that much to talk about as far as these other games are concerned, although first game I tend to like to lean to teams that didn't make the playoffs up against teams that did, but you're looking at quite a few teams that did make the playoffs last year playing today, actually, with Vancouver, Colorado, Vegas. They all made the playoffs last year. Winnipeg and Edmonton, obviously. Rangers also did. So I don't know. I don't have that much of a read on the rest of these games. Once the regular season gets going, I start getting into like situational handicapping of these games. So I'll leave it at that, and this won't actually be a terribly long video. And college football, we got a real great game in college football today, man. New Mexico State at Jacksonville State. Thanks to the schedule makers for giving us this one isolated game here, but it's Jacksonville State with Rich Rod, man. I mean, they're not like a totally unwatchable team, but New Mexico State, oh boy. This line, Jacksonville State's up from -20 to -21 with reduced juice, but looking like the line's moving up a little bit on Jayville State there. New Mexico State, they're one of the worst offenses in college football, and somehow they're getting the public tickets. I don't understand it. 66% of the tickets and 85% of the cash on New Mexico State. Are you kidding me? They're one of the worst passing offenses at the very least. New Mexico State's getting the public ticket percentage and looking like they're getting more of the cash percentage too. I'm not sure I buy that. And the total's up from 57 to 59 with a lot of play on the over. 89% of the tickets and 98% of the cash, both on the over. So the cash also coming in on the over. The line's moving up on the over. I'm not sure how I read this game, to be honest, because Jacksonville State, I mean, they played a huge high-scoring game. Not a huge game, but a very high-scoring game last week. So I think that's kind of influencing what's going on with the total. I mean, they scored 63 points against Kennesaw State last week, but Kennesaw State's probably one of the only FBS teams who's worse than New Mexico State. So I don't know what we can take away from that, really. Jacksonville State, so you're not going to find me playing an over on a team that's just been putting up ridiculously high point totals. So I really don't have much of a read on the total here, although, like I said, New Mexico State, they have a pretty decent rushing attack, but they can't throw the ball, so I don't think they're a team that really scores a whole lot. As far as New Mexico State is concerned, they've only won one game, and it was against Southeast Missouri, an FCS team, and they only beat them by one score, so that's not looking that good. They haven't put up a whole lot of high point totals either, so their offense is not very good. I mean, the odds makers are telling you what's going on here with Jacksonville State is just overall the way better team, obviously. New Mexico State has faced the worst schedule as well. I mean, their biggest opponents, Liberty's not that bad. They lost close to Liberty. Fresno's not very good, and they got smashed by Fresno on the road. Blown up by Sam Houston State, who I think is an okay team on the road. And then in their most recent start in this New Mexico rivalry, they lost to Bronco Mendenhall's New Mexico team, I believe. But New Mexico's in like a rebuilding phase. I don't think they're very good. And New Mexico State gave up 50 points to New Mexico in that game. Scored 40 themselves, but I don't know what we could even really take away from much of that other than the fact that New Mexico State has faced the weaker schedule, but New Mexico State does have extra time off here. So they had a bye last weekend. this past weekend. Really, I mean, they're playing in the middle of the week here. So it's really Jacksonville State that gets screwed by the scheduling here, which I'll talk about in a second. New Mexico State hasn't played since September 28th, which I believe, that was a Saturday. That was that New Mexico game. And since then, they've been off. They didn't play this Saturday. They're playing this Wednesday now, and then they start midweek games for a while. So New Mexico State has a little bit of extra time off. So they actually have the rest edge here. Jacksonville State has faced the harder slate of opponents. I mean, they faced Coastal Carolina. It was a pretty good team in Conference USA, or no, not Conference USA. This is Conference USA. Where's Coastal? Sun Belt? I don't know where they are. They might be in the Sun Belt now. I don't know where these teams are. They're a pretty good team, though. And then Jacksonville State lost at Louisville. I mean, that's not an easy place to go. And then I think maybe they were just kind of hung over after playing two pretty big games, and they lost on the road to Eastern Michigan, I think in double OT maybe. So Eastern Michigan, not that great a team, although they were in a bowl last year, so they're not one of the worst MAC teams, I guess, but still, that was Jacksonville State's worst loss. The other two losses, pretty excusable, and this one, maybe you could say they didn't have that much left in the tank because they came out of two bigger games, maybe. Then they finally faced two very weak opponents, and they beat them both easily. So I don't know what we can figure out about this Jacksonville State team, because they lost their toughest games. They lost the game that was kind of the most evenly matched game, I guess, that they had. I don't even know what the line was in this game, really. 2.5 on Jacksonville State. So Jacksonville State was a road favorite there. So they were the better team of those two, according to the odds makers, which I thought was the case. But they lost, and then they beat the two teams they were supposed to beat, Southern Miss and Kennesaw State, both quite bad, really, to be honest. So I don't know what we can take away from that, but Jacksonville State did wreck both of them. So Jacksonville State is the better team. They face the tougher schedule. Jacksonville State, they don't have a good rushing defense. That's really their weak spot, is their rushing defense. Their passing defense, I think, is their weak spot, right? I forget what I was going to say. I think their passing defense is their weak spot, because I was going to say whatever it is, it's weakness on weakness. So I'm pretty sure that, New Mexico State's passing offense is their weak point. Jacksonville State's passing defense is their weak point. So New Mexico State, I don't think is that well equipped to take advantage of Jacksonville State's defensive weaknesses. I think Jacksonville State is better against the run, their defensive weaknesses. I think they're better against the run, and that's what New Mexico State does. They run the ball, so that's what we have going on there. So it's weakness against weakness, and strength against strength when Jacksonville State is on the defensive side of things. So Jacksonville State does have a scheduling sort of disadvantage here, because they had to play 5 days ago on a Friday, so they didn't have a bye on the past week. So they're on short rest while New Mexico State's on long rest. So I don't know if there's anything we take away from that. New Mexico State's probably using that extra rest to try to fix some things, because they did go into that on a bad note, losing in a rivalry game, but losing a tough rivalry game. But still, they went in on a bad note, so they're probably using that bye and that extra time to fix things, whereas Jacksonville State's just playing through. But, I mean, they had a pretty easy game last Friday, to be honest, against Kennesaw State, so they didn't really have to put in like that big of an effort there, I don't think so. You could see this not being as bad as it might look, the fact that they only have 5 days off, but still they're at a rest disadvantage. I'm not playing this game, obviously. I mean, this game is just good luck to you if you're going to put money on a game like this. That's going to do it for me, man. I think that's pretty much all I got to say there. I mean, if you forced me to lean in this game, I don't even know, man. I guess I would lean with where the cash discrepancy is right now, to taking the boys with New Mexico State and hope that they can just take advantage of that rest edge and slow the game down enough with their rushing attack to just somehow kind of stay within that number. I don't know. Total, I really don't have a read on it, although the cash percentage, I mean, it's gone up on the over, but like I said, I don't really like the over in that one at all, because both teams really were in high-scoring affairs in their last game, so I would tend to want to actually take the under in that one, which correlates to New Mexico State if you like that side, but there's no way I'm going to be doing that. Stacks, what's up, guys? Yeah, the slump continues. Or what's up, man? Yeah, the slump continues. Thanks for hanging out, guys. That's going to do it for me. My plays one more time. Major League Baseball, Kansas City Royals, first 5 innings, -105 on the money line. And then NHL, Winnipeg Jets, +142. let's get it done, man. I'm on a win streak, but it's been a lot of small winning days in a row. So it's been very much a grind recently. Let's keep it going. I'm just hovering right above the break-even point on the year right now. So a slight win. It's just been hovering there for a while. I want to get some padding. Let's do it, man. I'm Tower Gang Toad, of course. Follow me on Twitter, X, whatever. Follow the Tower Gang podcast. We should be on tonight, the most hilarious podcast on the planet, but 3/5 of our hosts are getting battered by this hurricane, so I don't even know if we're going to actually have an episode tonight. We will see what happens tonight. Usually we're on at 9-11 p.m. Eastern, Wednesday nights. And go sign up for the Patreon, patreon.com/TowerGang. You get live pre-show, live post-show. You get to hang out with us in a Telegram. That's going to do it for me, man. I'll be back with the weekly college football videos at some point. I don't know if I'm going to continue doing them Friday, Saturday nights, although the scheduling for it has kind of worked out better for me, even though it means no sleep. But we will see. Have a good one. Peace out, guys. Thanks for hanging out.